Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. First and foremost, please forgive my voice this week. I am getting over a cold, but I didn't want that to stop me from getting out the video today that I promised you guys. And that is gonna be how to crochet a chunky blanket, just as soft and luxurious as our last video. This is using a different yarn, and it is using a crochet hook. Now, don't be scared, guys. I've got to tell you, I used to not want to do anything with a crochet hook. I just wanted to do the hand knitting. Next week, as I'll talk about a little bit in my video, I am going to show you how to make this blanket, not using the crochet hook, but actually crocheting with our hands. We'll use a different color, but I'll show you how to use the exact same thing. This is an incredibly heavy blanket, you guys. And this is only an average size throw blanket. It's about 42 inches by 65 inches, but it is still such a good size and does have a little bit of a stretch to it, which I love, and it is super warm. Now I know we're getting into spring, warm blankets are gonna be a thing of the past real quickly, but spring is here. I do have some spring blanket tutorials coming up. Stay tuned for those. And let's face it, baby blankets are amazing and they're born all year long. So there's always, always, always time to make beautiful blankets. I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope, if anything, I really do tailor these to my beginners, which is why they are so long. I really do get into explaining exactly what and why. For my novice out there, feel free to fast forward where you like and just grab the pattern and a little bit of the information on the number of stitches and dimensions, and happy crocheting. For my beginners, I hope that you're able to feel comfortable with the stitch by the end of the video and feel comfortable with the pattern. And if anything, I've given you the inspiration. Feel free to rewind, rewatch, reuse the videos. I am trying to grow this little channel, and anything that you can do as far as liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing, all of that stuff, it really, really does help. So I appreciate that in advance. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, guys, welcome back. As promised, in today's tutorial, we're going to work on another blanket. When you see this crochet hook, do not skip out, stay with me. I know when I first was learning to crochet and hand knit, anytime I saw a crochet hook video, I didn't want to watch it. This just seemed foreign to me. It seemed like, I don't know, just something I didn't want to try. Now that I have forced myself to get comfortable with it, not gonna lie, guys, these are so easy. These really make your work go very quickly and much easier, I think. Now, don't get me wrong, my next video next week, I'm gonna show you guys how to do this exact same blanket, just using your hands without the hook. Is there really a preference between the two? Not necessarily. Again, I do notice that the hook does make things go a little bit quicker. However, it is nice to tote my project around the house, wherever I'm gonna be sitting and hanging out for a little bit, where I can just sit down and work with my hands as well. So stay with me. If this is new to you, I promise by the time you're done with probably 4 or 5 rows of your blanket, this is gonna feel like an extension of your hand. As you can see here, we are gonna be using the Wool Ease Thick and Quick yarn. This is a number 6 super bulky. This one is a 80% acrylic, 20% wool, which is really, really nice because that 20% wool gives such warmth to this yarn and therefore to your blanket. Now, on that same note, because of the 20% wool, you are gonna notice a little bit of shedding. It happens because it's wool. Okay, I have noticed that, and again, this is amazing yarn because you can wash it and dry it. Mandatory in my house, we have to be able to wash our blankets. The shedding does tend to stop after a few washes. At least I've noticed. The color that I'm using is called Fisherman. Sometimes I have noticed, as with all yarns, you guys, you are going to notice sometimes the dye lots that they do are a little bit different. This one I feel did come out a little more creamy yellow than some other skeins of the same color that I've gotten, which were a little bit more milky white. But nevertheless, that is the color we're going to be using today. You'll notice that if you do order it online, sometimes that's when you'll get some color variances, and they all have disclaimers about the color dye lots, you guys, that sometimes they will vary. Sometimes you'll have to exchange it, but when you're in the store and you're grabbing your yarn of all the same colors, just hold them up next to each other just to make sure that they all match. And I have noticed that across the brands. That is not specific to just this yarn. All right, so all we're gonna need is our yarn, our hook, and a pair of scissors. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, we always begin every blanket with our slip knot, and I just wrap my yarn around my hand twice here, pull this through, grab onto that little loop that we've done, and tighten your knot. Now, slip knots are named that for a reason, because you can take this tail and adjust the size of your knot here, either larger or smaller. And that's really important because when you are using a hook especially, you're going to want to tighten this around your hook, but leave a little bit of room in there. You want your hook to be able to move freely through it. You don't want this pulled up so tight that it makes working with this difficult. So just a little bit of room in there. And then we're gonna start our blanket with our foundation chain. Now for the blanket that I showed you, this is another little swatch that I did. I did chain on 72 chains, and I went up 52 rows. And the reason why I did it that way is I wanted my pattern to be vertical. So the blanket length for mine is much longer this way than this way, versus if I did it the other way around, my blanket would end up with the horizontal pattern. I just liked this better. I just wanted to play off of that vertical row texture a little bit more. So that's why I did the number the way that I did. I hope that makes sense. For this sample, I'm gonna go ahead and chain on 20 stitches. You can go ahead and do your 72, and then we can meet at the end. For my beginners, in order to do your chain, all you're gonna do is wrap your yarn around your hook. I always like to wrap towards me. I like to hang on to my knot here, and you're just gonna pull that through. And that is one chain. Wrap around and pull through. Wrap around and pull through. It's that easy. Now, if you are in a house like mine that is very, very busy and you get distracted and you're trying to count your chains and you lose count, don't panic. The way you can identify each chain is with this V shape. Each one of these is a stitch, including this slip knot here. So I do have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chains so far. I'm gonna add on my 15 more and I'll meet you there at the end. And I don't know if you're noticing here, but I do like to hold on to this as I'm pulling through, and then I hold on here just so that I get the right tension and I'm not gonna get loops like this, or even not able to do. You don't want your chain to end up like this. I think the most challenging part and most rewarding part of crochet is trying just to keep a consistent size in all of your stitches. Don't overthink it. As you can see, this one here is a little more bumpy than the one next to it. It's all gonna blend in. You're just gonna do your best and be aware to try to keep tension as consistent as possible. You can also give your chain a little yank, and that does tend to even things out a little bit as well. All right, so we are at the end of our chain. I'm just going to count to make sure. And I've got 20. So with crochet, we do work. I'm working from my right to my left. Each row is going to be from my right to my left. And in order to achieve that, when we get to the end of a row, we turn our work. So now I can begin the next row again from my right to my left. I'm sorry to all of you lefties out there. I'm not ambidextrous enough to show you a left-handed video, but they do exist. So if you are left-handed, don't fret. Crochet is for you too, I promise. All right, so we're going to go ahead and begin our first row. And one thing that is important to remember, you'll hear or see in patterns to work your first stitch into the first chain from your hook, first chain, or your second chain from your hook, or third chain, or so forth. All right, so for this blanket, we are going to go ahead and start working right into that first chain from our hook. And all we're going to do is insert our hook into the top bumps of this chain. Hopefully you can see that there, but just right into the top. And it is 2 strands because we've doubled up, but typically it would just be one that you'd see. Because we've doubled up, we do want to make sure our hook does get through both of those strands. Okay, so you're going to insert your hook, wrap your yarn, and you're just going to pull through that first loop. And you're going to end up with 2 on your hook. Wrap your yarn again and pull through both. That is a single crochet. That is your entire blanket, you guys. All right, so we're here with our chain. Here is our next stitch here. So I'm going to go, sometimes I like to take my fingers and kind of put them together to create a space for my hook if my stitches get a little too tight. And again, a single crochet. Next stitch, insert your hook, pull your yarn through once, pull through both times. Insert your hook, yarn through, insert your hook. One other tip that I do want to give is if your hook is facing up, it gets very difficult to slide through your loops. What you'll want to do is, again, because each one of these stitches has almost a V shape, there is that better space right in this side, where the point of the V, if you will, and that is a perfect spot for that hook to guide right through without any problems. So wrap through, and again, and I kind of pull down just a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but if I'm pulling down, you can see I'm creating a space right through here that makes it to where I can guide my yarn or my hook and yarn right through there, if you will. So again, I'm just kind of pulling that down just a little bit. I'm pulling the hook up, away, and through. So it just slides nice and easy. Next stitch, same thing. Wrap and pull through. I'll show you guys a couple of more. And again, this is just a single crochet. Pull through once, wrap, and pull through both. All right, I'm gonna go to the end of my row. If you are doing your full 72, feel free to go to the end of your row. We can meet there when we're both done, and then I can show you how to begin your second row. All right, you guys, so I am at the end of my row. One thing it is incredibly easy to do is to forget this last stitch, which is that slip knot that we created. That does count as a stitch in your patterns. Don't miss that one because we do not want a crooked blanket. And then you can also start to see how that just stacks on nice and even. All right, so this is what else I love about this yarn is it does have that bit of stretch to it. That's that acrylic, of course. Now with crochet, in order to keep a straight edge on our blankets, at the end of each row, you're always gonna do what's called a turning chain. Sometimes you'll create 1, 2, 3, even more chains depending on your pattern. Because we're just doing a single crochet, we're just gonna do 1 turning chain. And just like in the beginning, when we created our foundation chain, it's the same thing. You're wrapping your yarn around and pulling through once. And you're just gonna do that 1 time at the end of every row. So as long as you don't forget that, you're gonna end up with a nice straight blanket. And of course, we're going to turn our work. And then what we're going to end up doing, because we have created, we're gonna start row 2 here, because we have created that turning chain, that has already created this part here. So we're not gonna go into this first stitch, we're gonna go into the next one. Now with crochet, it's easy for me to show you this way. I look at my stitches like these big knots right here. And every time I go to a stitch, I'm gonna insert my hook just to the side. So if I've gone here, the next one, I'm gonna go here, and then I'm gonna go here, and so forth. The other thing you wanna make sure that you do, if you look at the top of the stitch here, is when we do go into the next stitch, and I'm putting my hook in, you do wanna make sure you have that full V pattern on the top. And that's just for this blanket. There are some other blankets or other patterns for things where you'll learn to just crochet into the front or just crochet into the back. Don't let it confuse you. But for today, we're keeping it very, very simple, and we're just gonna go through both sides. Make sure you've got all 4 strands. If you're missing one, you wanna make sure you do grab it. Shouldn't be a problem because your hook is very easily gonna go through each one of these. And so again, we've already created that turning chain here, so now we're gonna create a single crochet right on top there. And we're gonna just keep going. Next one. All the way down our row. Next stitch here, pull your yarn through, wrap, and pull it through both. Next stitch, pull through once, wrap, pull through both. And you'll see that that is starting to create this nice stack of stitches that becomes our pattern. I'm gonna go to the end of my row here, and then I will meet you at the end, and we'll show you how to start the 3rd row. All right, so we're at the end of the 2nd row, and just wanna make sure we don't miss this last stitch. I've got 2 more here. I'm gonna go ahead and do this next one. And then as you can see, if we don't do another stitch right in here, our blanket's gonna be crooked. So what you wanna do is make sure this next stitch is off to the side here. And just like you did on the top, grabbing that whole V stitch right here, you wanna do that on the side as well. I usually like to grab it with my finger first and then guide my hook through. Just tends to be easier when I'm doing it for me. And then as you can see, that creates that nice even border. All right, so that is the end of row 2. We're now gonna start row 3. So if you remember, we're gonna chain 1 to create our turning chain. and turn our work. And as you guys can see, just with 2 rows here, just how quickly this blanket is going to work up. I mean, once you really get a good feel for how this crochet works and you start working faster, you can create a blanket of this size in 4 to 5 hours. It really is that quick and easy. And again, just using that same single crochet stitch all the way through. All right, so here we are. The turning chain has created that border here. So I'm not going to go into this stitch here. I'm going to go into the next one. Pull through once, wrap, and pull through both. I'll show you here how that creates that straight edge. All right, and so as you can see here, by doing that stitch that way, you've got a nice straight little border here, and then you're stacking each one of your stitches right on top. So it does create that nice even border. Now go ahead and continue doing your single crochet until you run out of yarn on those first 2 skeins. All right, so this is just my sample. I'm clearly not out of yarn at this moment, but I did go ahead and snip this off just to show you how to add more yarn. Now, sometimes you'll just be adding more yarn of the same color. Sometimes you'll be at a stopping point where you're going to change colors. Either way, this process is the same. Now, I used to tie these together each strand, even if I had 3 of them. But recently I have truly decided to treat each one of these as one strand, and just all you're going to do, guys, is create a knot. It's so much easier. And give it a nice tight tug, and this is where the scissors come in. And what you're going to do is go ahead and get those scissors nice and close to the knot, and you're just going to snip off these tails. And then all you're going to do is continue to crochet as you have been. And that knot that you just tied in just tends to disappear into your work. It's technically right here. Sometimes I'll get a little crazy and make sure I tuck it in. Don't overthink it. Sometimes they work themselves out. Nobody else is going to know where those knots are, only you, because you did this. But they do hide beautifully. All right, so I'm going to come down to the end of my row here. Go ahead and work up the rest of your blanket. Just remembering to do that turning chain at the end of each row. And also remembering when you do get to the end of each row to grab that V stitch. Again, I do that with my finger here to guide my hook through, and do that. Make sure you do that last stitch, and you'll just see how that creates, again, nice even borders. And then I'll do my turning chain here. And then I'm going to start not into that first stitch, I'm going to start right into here, the second stitch. All right, we're at the end of the next row. And so once again, I want to grab, you can kind of see this piece that folds over, and then you'll see this V. That's when I'm going to go ahead and grab either with my fingers or with my hook, just to make sure I get that last stitch. Turning chain, turn my work. And so you see it just keeps it symmetrical. I'm going to add a few more rows here, and then I will show you how I end up doing my border so that we get that nice pretty texture on all 4 sides of our blanket. And I'll see you there in just a moment. All right, guys, so I am at the end of my sample here. And as you can see, this is a pretty large sample. And if you can think that, this can be made in about 10 to 15 minutes, you can definitely really start to see how making that larger blanket can be so quick once you just get used to it. Now, with the dimension, or with the number of stitches that I gave you guys earlier, chaining 72 and then doing 52 rows, I ended up with a blanket that was approximately 42 inches by 65 inches, which is a decent sized throw blanket. If you want yours larger, you're simply going to chain on more and add more rows. There's not a right or wrong answer to it. It really is your preference, the size that you want, and of course the amount of yarn that you have. When you get to the end of your blanket here, first thing I'm going to do, this was our original slip knot. One thing that I do like to do is go ahead and, some people will use a tapestry needle. I'll go ahead and just use my hook here, and I'm going to weave this in a couple of times, weave in my tail. Sorry, that one got a little hooked on it. Then I'll come through the top, grab that, weave that through, come through the bottom. And this just hides very well inside of your stitches. And then for a little bit of extra security, one other thing that I will do is go ahead and tie one more knot. Now, because I'm going to be going around the edges of this one more time, I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot right here on the end. I normally would not do that because it would create this, but that's going to be hidden. And then I'll take my scissors and go ahead and cut off that tail. Now, normally, after tucking that tail in, I would create a knot right here, and you can be done with your blanket. You can absolutely be finished keeping it just like this. There's nothing wrong with this. Again, I do have my little trick that I like to do. Once I get to the end of my row here, I go ahead and I turn my blanket. And what I do is, for each one of these rows that I've created here, I break it in half. And what I'm going to do is a single crochet. So here's a half of them, half of that first row, a single crochet. Here's the next half, single crochet again. And I'm going to do this all the way around my blanket. And that way, as you can see, it's creating that same border. Now, I won't do the top again. I'm just going to go ahead and go through the side, down the very first part that we created, and up to here, and I'll end my blanket right here. All right, so next, right in half here. I just think it just adds something a little extra pretty, again, not just when the blanket is out, but also when it's folded, if you have it hanging on a display ladder, wherever it may be. I just think this adds a little something extra, where it just keeps it nice and consistent. Now, for the bottom, where we first started, I am going to go ahead and go into each stitch, just like what is already there, because I don't want to combine stitches. I don't want to split any. I still want it to look nice and consistent. And I'm just grabbing those V's and doing a stitch into each one. And then I've hidden that knot that I created with the tail. And so again, just into the next stitch. So same thing, single crochet all the way around. Sometimes I will do this border all the way around with a different color, in which case I would end up going all 4 sides. If you wanted to do your blanket one color and create a border, this is another way to do that as well. You would just, when we got to the end here, you would end up going ahead and changing your color of yarn. And that makes a really, really pretty blanket as well. And it doesn't even have to be the same type of yarn. You can do a completely different type of yarn for a border. For this one, I just kept it all the same because I just wanted to focus on the texture of the stitches themselves rather than just the texture of the yarn. And so here we are for the last side. So again, each one of these rows that you see here, I'll do a stitch in the middle, stitch to the side, stitch in the middle, stitch to the side of just that single crochet. And that is that last stitch, guys. So when you get to the end of your blanket, all you're gonna do is go ahead and cut your yarn away. And then I like to go ahead and just pull this through, create a knot here at the end. And you can go ahead and do the same thing and weave a little bit of this through. I just go through each one of the stitches here. I'm just gonna pull that through. And again, you can use a tapestry needle, you can use your hook like I'm doing here. I feel it's easier just to do my hook rather than have something extra that I need to keep track of. That one doesn't want to go through. And so as before, I had put the knot right on top. I don't want to do that. So what I'll end up doing is going through one of these stitches here, create a loop, pull that through, and then tie a nice little knot that will be hidden in there forever. And snip that off. And nobody will ever know that that was there. And so like I said, it just creates an extra pretty little border around all 4 sides of your blanket. It's not quite as pretty on this sample size, but when you do have a nice big blanket that's folded and you have that really pretty border all the way around, I feel like it really does make a difference. So just an extra little added bonus. All right, everybody, that's it for today's tutorial. Once again, I hope I've either taught you how to do something new or inspired you to try something new, or even just given you some inspiration to keep developing what you already know. Loved having you here. Again, like, subscribe, comment below, share, tell your friends and family. Love your support. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you next week.